Hello, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you guys are enjoying time out with your families, your loved ones, your friends. And if you guys are working today, I really feel for you guys. I hope you guys are enjoying a Thanksgiving dinner, brunch, whatever. Welcome to Cinemacast. Today's special feature for you guys is another John Hughes classic. Last week we talked about John Hughes's 1991 classic Dutch. Today we're talking about one from 1987. Today's feature is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And oh boy, I grew up watching this hilarious comedy starring Steve Martin and John Candy. You cannot go wrong with this comedy duo of 1987. You know, Steve Martin and John Candy, they it seems like they ruled the comedies of the 80s into the 90s, you know, especially John Candy. John Candy is such a heartwarming actor. And I'm not going to say like everything he stars in turns to gold, but he is definitely one of the most underrated comedians to ever be out there. And he was such a very genuine actor. He was a very genuine guy in real life. You know, he was never an asshole to everybody or anything. You know, he was very genuine. And this movie here, even though it shows sort of like maybe an opposite of him, I don't know, like kind of like a reflection. But even with Steve Martin, like with Steve Martin's type of comedy, you know, it definitely reflects in this movie. And you got both these guys, they are just perfect together. Before I get into today's review, guys, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below in the channel if you really do enjoy watching our reviews and all of our other videos and such. Also, if you are into our streams, our podcasts, and our game streams, follow us on twitch.tv/arrow with a name and kick.com/arrow entertainment. And you can follow us on our Twitter feed, link all down below, as well as our Discord link. If you guys are on Discord and want to follow us over there as well, click that link down below. So, oh boy, this movie came out in 1987, written, produced, and directed by John Hughes. And it starred Steve Martin and John Candy with supporting roles by Layla Robbins and Michael McKean. This movie tells the story of Neil Page, a high-strung marketing executive, and Del Griffith, a good-hearted but irritating shower curtain ring salesman, who become travel companions when their flight is diverted and embark on a 3-day odyssey of misadventures trying to get to Chicago in time for Neil's Thanksgiving Day dinner with his family. The film received critical acclaim, with many praising it for Hughes branching out from teen comedies and for Candy's and Martin's performances. This movie has become a Thanksgiving Day tradition for everybody. Just like Christmas Vacation or Christmas Story or Bad Santa, whatever movies you've got around the Christmas season usually become your traditional movies right there. This one here, along with Dutch, they've become staples when it comes to Thanksgiving. And let me tell you something, you cannot go on Thanksgiving. You cannot have a Thanksgiving without watching this movie at all. Now, this movie was filmed, they began filming for it in February 1987, and filming lasted 85 days. Mostly in Batavia, New York, and South Dayton, New York. A scene that takes place in St. Louis was filmed at St. Louis Lambert International Airport. There was also a scene in the movie at Braidwood, Illinois at the Sun Motel. Rewrites Hughes did during the filming made the amount of footage he shot much larger than the original screenplay needed in the film's first cut was, and get this movie runs 92 minutes, guys, an hour and a half. The original cut for this movie was 3 hours and 45 minutes long. That's a lot of Steve Martin and John Candy for you. There was also a subplot about Neil's wife not believing him and suspecting that he is with another woman, was cut from that too. This movie also has a fantastic soundtrack. It was a mixture of rock and roll, country, and pop. The phonetic musical score by Ira Newborn makes the extensive use of the folk song Red River Valley, including a cover of Johnny and the Hurricanes' rock and roll version of Red River Rock. And then you got other stuff in there from Patsy Cline, Ray Charles, Modigliani, which is a Requiem version that you guys are hearing in the background right now. It's done by the band Book of Love, the Dream Academy. And then there was even a cover of the song Every Time You Go Away, performed by Blue Room, which is played in the final scene in the credits. Hughes had originally planned to use Paul Young's well-known hit version, but was denied the rights by the record company, even though Young approved of Hughes planning to use the song and wanted to see it included. But everything was all good. You know, it still has a pretty good soundtrack to it. This movie, when it came out, it was widely noticed, marked a widely noticed change in the repertoire of John Hughes. Because at the time, in the 80s, John Hughes was well known for making teen comedies like The Breakfast Club, you know, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So he made a departure from that, moving on to adult comedies like Dutch in 91 or this movie in 87. It was greeted with critical acclaim upon release, in particular receiving, and I talked about Siskel and Ebert in the last episode, and I did rewatch the review of this, and I definitely agree with their review on this, of course. They gave it 2 thumbs up, Siskel and Ebert. Gene Siskel declaring that it was Candy's best role to date. The film was featured in Roger Ebert's Great Movies collection. Ebert writing that it is a perfectly casted and soundly constructed, and all else flows naturally. Steve Martin and John Candy don't play characters, they embody themselves. That's why the comedy, which begins securely planted in the twin genres of the road movie and a buddy picture, is able to reveal so much heart and truth. Even Leonard Maltin called the movie a bitter-sweet farce, arguing that while the film was hurt by an awful music score, I disagree. The movie's soundtrack, it fits the movie perfectly. You know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I feel the soundtrack is placed in there perfectly with the music regardless. And I know how some people feel about that. You know, a mix of, you know, movie score and the film itself. They feel a little bit different about it. But I disagree with Leonard Maltin on that as well. Hughes refuses to make either Martin or Candy a caricature, which keeps this amiable film teetering between slapstick shenanigans and compassionate comedy. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 92% based on 66 reviews, average score of 7.9 out of 10. The site's critics consistent states, thanks to the impeccable chemistry between Steve Martin and John Candy, as well as a deft mix of humor and heart, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a hilarious, heartfelt holiday comedy. And it truly is. This movie has so much heart. And it has so many funny outtakes with it. And here's a little tidbit for you guys, too. There is a scene in this movie, and it's within the first 5 minutes of the movie, 5-10 minutes of the movie. You see Steve Martin's character on the street trying to hail a cab to the airport. And on the other side of the road, he glances over and sees Kevin Bacon. Now, at the time, Kevin Bacon was in another John Hughes movie that was set to come out called She's Having a Baby. So it was said that these two movies seem to fall into the same universe with each other because they're both John Hughes movies, and they seem to both take place at the same time. So, you know, you got Kevin Bacon, who just happens to appear in the movie. And then, of course, if you see the very early VHS releases in the late 80s of this movie, there is a trailer in there for She's Having a Baby. So both movies came out, I think, around the same time. So that makes a lot of sense. And unfortunately, looking at remake status, it said in August 2020, a remake was reported to be in development with Will Smith and Kevin Hart as the leads, and later Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler. They want to remake this classic. Why do you want to remake classics? Why must you shit in the face of, good decency, a good motion picture like this? Why must you shit on it? Yes, it's not as memorable as Lord of the Rings, those high-grossing movies are like Titanic, but goddamn, this is a classic. Why would you slap John Candy in the face with this? You're not honoring him, you're slapping him in the face. This is a very important movie to some people when it comes to, the holiday season. So the movie follows, and before I get into it, guys, like I say, in all of our episodes here, I read out the synopsis or I explain what's going on in the movie. Now, if you don't want to hear about it, if you want to see the movie, find the movie on a streaming platform. I'm pretty sure you can find it anywhere. It's very common. Watch the movie, come back and watch the review. You guys will not be disappointed. So this movie, it starts out, you got an advertising executive, Neil Page, played by Steve Martin. He's on a business trip to New York City, and he is eager to return to his family in Chicago 2 days before Thanksgiving. It's kind of cutting it close with that. But after a late-running business meeting with an indecisive client named Mr. Bryant, Neil struggles to hail a cab during rush hour. He even resigns to bribing a man to let him have his cab, only to find out somebody else stole it. And it happens to be Del Griffith's character, played by John Candy. Neil then arrives at the airport, only to find out that his flight is delayed, so he's got to wait. But while he's waiting there, sitting right across from him is Del Griffith. And they meet eye to eye, and he's almost got that look of, I have seen you before. And then he realizes where he's seen him. So then you got, Del, he starts out, his comical, he's very comical. He's like, I know you, don't I? And he just starts babbling on. So he's just this babbling person. He just starts talking. And he's like, oh, you're the guy who tried to get my cab. I thought I knew you. And then he's apologetic about it. He's like, oh, man, it was awful easy getting a cab during rush hour. So he apologizes and he tries to make it up to him and all. And he's like, hey, just let me know. I'm here. I will do anything for you. And then, of course, everybody starts boarding the plane, right? So the funny thing about this movie is every time something happens, Neil ends up with this other guy. They end up meeting side by side some way, somehow. And that's the whole theme of this whole movie for a reason. It's almost like in this movie, they were meant to meet each other. They were meant to be with each other throughout this whole movie for a reason. And it becomes a very subtle thing in the end. So they get on the plane, and it turns out Neil is sitting next to Del. So, the plane scene, Del's introducing himself, talking about what he does, learning a bit about Neil. And then, at night, it's at nighttime, of course. So everybody turns the lights off. He's sleeping on. It's funny because Neil's stuck in between this older guy and Del, and they're both sleeping with their heads on his shoulders. And he looks over to Del, and Del's like, $6 and my right nut says we don't land in Chicago. And of course they don't. They really don't, because it kind of diverts them a little bit. The plane diverts them to another place that's a little bit further out than Chicago. So they land at another airport, and then they decide, okay, let's book a room for tonight. I know the Braywood Inn. It's a motel. He's like, I know the owner there. I sold him some shower curtain rings. So that also becomes a little side note, because he's a shower curtain ring salesman. He's selling shower curtain rings to people that he knows, and that becomes a thing. And it's like, how do you get by in life? You're selling shower curtain rings. All the while, Neil's carrying his business bag, right? That's all he has is his business bag and his suit. Dell's carrying around this great big trunk of stuff that has clothes and shit in it. You know, he's got this great big fucking trunk that he hauls around the city all over with him. So that becomes another piece to the whole thing, you know, is his trunk. So they decide to get a cab, but it's not just a cab, it's just this some punk who's driving around in this souped up car playing this nice hard rock music, you know, and it's just like, it's such an uncomfortable but hilarious scene. And they make their way to the motel. You know, they check into the motel. Turns out it's the last room in the complex, and it's a single bedroom. So these guys, they have to share one bed together. You know, they have to sleep in a bed together. And leading up to that, you know, you got the scene where, you know, Neil's taking a shower, water cuts out on him, but then it comes back. And then, of course, you know, he opens the shower curtain and he realizes that Dell has used up all the fucking towels and the bathroom has left a horrific mess. So he's like, oh my God, what the fuck did I end up with? This guy, he's a fucking slob. He used up everything but one little fucking wash rag, which Neil has to use to dry himself off. And then, of course, you know, the next scene follows. You know, they're in bed. They're trying to sleep with each other. You know, they're trying to make it happen, that kind of thing. Oh, excuse me, guys. Whew. Thought I had to sneeze there for a second during the show. So they're in bed. They're trying to get comfy. Dell's being annoying with his snoring and clearing his nose and all. It frustrates Neil. So he gets up. He's very frustrated. He's ready to pack up and leave. So then he stands there and he's insulting Dell to every which way he can. It's almost like since the airport, Neil has been bottling in his emotions, his feelings toward this guy, and he just lets it all out. And rather than fight back, you know, Dell, he comes out with this very passionate and descriptive, it's just in detail, and I gotta find it for you guys, okay? It's like, okay, what does Dell Griffith say in the motel room? Like, I don't want to end up playing, you know, the whole thing, but it's a quote. It really is. It's like, I'm looking at this. Okay, so Neil, he's insulting him, right? And Dell's just standing there taking it. So then after he finishes it, Dell looks right back at him and says, you want to hurt me? Go right ahead if it makes you feel any better. I'm an easy target. Yeah, you're right. I talk too much. But I also listen too much. I can be a cold-hearted cynic like you, but I don't like to hurt people's feelings. Well, you think what you want about me. I'm not changing. I like me. My customers like me. My wife likes me, because I'm the real article. What you see is what you get. And that pretty much turned Neil Page's whole attitude around to where he decided, okay, I'm gonna stay in the room. You know, he's right. I was a little bit out of place, but he is right. You know, he has a right to, you know, his feelings and all. And it is such a heartfelt quote from John Candy's character. It's such a heartfelt quote, and it's the first time that you can really feel for these characters, especially Dell. And it's like, let that sink in as to, you know, his character, his overall demeanor with this character. So anyway, after Neil decides that he's going to stay in the room, you know, of course, somebody happens to break into the room, you know, steal their money and shit, and then leave out. Now, if you buy the 4K version of this movie that just came out a year or so ago, there is a ton of deleted scenes in this movie. And one of the scenes, and it leads up to why this person breaks into their room and steals their money. So there is a scene that leads up to that, you know, and it's almost hilarious in a way. But you got to buy the 4K version, you know, and watch the deleted scenes, or you could even look up the deleted scenes on YouTube. You can look them up right on here on YouTube. You can watch them, and you can see what led up to that. So anyway, the next morning they wake up. And, it's a very uncomfortable wake up, too. They wake up to, I think it was Patsy Cline playing something on the radio. And then you see, and the camera slowly scrolls over, and you see Del holding Neil in his arms, and he's kissing his ear. And then Neil wakes up, and he's like, Del, why did you kiss my ear? And Del's like, why are you holding my hand? And Neil's like, where's your other hand? And Del's like, between two pillows. And he was like, those aren't pillows. And they fucking jump up screaming and shaking the shivers off of them and shit. And it's just so hilarious. It's like one of the best scenes in the movie. And they just brush it off, like with some random guy talking. He's like, oh, did you see that Bears game last week? Oh, yeah, it was a hell of a game. They're going all the way. So then after that, after they go down to the diner, they're getting something to eat, and they realize that, their money was stolen. They were both robbed. So you got Neil accusing Del of stealing from him. So Del puts his wallet on the counter. He say, look, there's $263 in there. If there's a dollar more in there, then you can call me a thief. So he checks his wallet, empty. So then Del's looking through it himself, and he's like, what? We were robbed. Oh, do you think so? Just a subtle dialogue from both these characters with their chemistry. It makes for a good comical experience. So now they're on their flight. They're on their way to try to make it home to Chicago every which way they can. They get picked up by the hotel owner's son. He takes them to a train station. They get on a train, and it's like, okay, we'll probably meet you at the next stop or whatever, And then of course the train derails. Everything just starts happening. The train derails. They get off the train. So then Del and Neil have to walk to a bus stop, a bus station. They make it to the bus station. Then they got to pay for the fares. They're taking a bus to St. Louis. I think it's like St. Louis or something, or Jefferson City, I think. No, it's traveling to St. Louis. That's where it's traveling to. So then, that's where they end up parting their ways, So after they part their ways at another diner, Neil decides to go to a rent-a-car place at the airport. He attempts to rent a car, but turns out the car is missing. So now he has this fit. He's pissed off. He's already had a terrible day, meeting some random guy that he does not want to be part of. Now he has a fit. He decides to walk all the way back to the rental car place, and he starts cussing this woman out. By the way, this woman, if I could find her name, oh my God, you guys will be... let's see, where is her name at? I can't... But anyway, this woman, she was Edie McClurg. Edith McClurg. If you don't know that name, she was also in the movie Carrie. She was also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. She was the principal's assistant or something in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The redheaded, the heavy-set redhead woman, she's in here. So she's his attendant. She's the attendant at this rental car place. And, he's already pissed off. Neil's already pissed off. And then when she finally like, oh, how can I help you? And he is just so pissed. And you can see him seething his anger through his teeth. And then she's like, how may I help you? And I'm not going to recite the whole quote because there's so much, but let's just say he must say the word fuck 20-some times in this dialogue scene. And he is just so immensely pissed with what has happened. And he's cussing this woman out. And then she's like, oh, can I see your rental agreement? He's like, oh, I threw it away. She's like, oh, boy. He's like, oh, boy, what? And then she looks at him firmly. She's like, you're fucked. And of course, it goes on to the next scene where he's leaving the place and he's trying to figure a way out of there and shit. And he's just taking his anger out on anybody that he sees, right? The next guy he sees, he insults, and the guy knocks him in the face and he falls on the ground. And of course, this random car comes out of nowhere, driving like a maniac, and it stops right in front of him. And lo and behold, it turns out to be Del. So Del ends up getting a car. He helps, Neil in the car, and they start their road trip on the way back, and it's like the next few minutes, they're in the car, they're driving at night. First Neil's driving, and then Del's driving, and then there's so much shit that goes on. during this trip. And let's just say it ends up where they're on the side of the road and they manage to get out to recover some things that have flown off the car. And they're sitting there in the very early morning hours. You know, it's very late, it's very night. They're sitting on top of Dell's trunk. And they're trying to take a breather, you know, catch a breath. And next thing you know, the car happens to catch fire. Because sometime in the evening, you know, while Dell was driving, he's smoking a cigarette, flicked it out the window, came right back in the back seat. So now the car, it's lit on fire. And it's almost like, what could happen wrong? You know, what next could happen? You know, that could be so wrong. The car set fire. So now you got Neil and Dell, they start laughing about it. They started just hysterically laughing about the car setting fire. And then come to find out, you know, Dell had used one of Neil's credit cards to rent the car, which, and of course, pissed him off. And when he demands that he returns the car back, and he says he can't because he put the card in his wallet, and his wallet was left in the car, charred ablaze. So, after that minor incident happened, you know, they managed to make their way to another motel for a second night. Neil's all pissed off with Dell. He wants nothing to do with him. He tells him, get your own room. I'm going to get my room. They managed to get a room. Well, Neil manages to get a room with $30, I think it was, and his watch. No, $17 in his watch, which came up to like $30-some, I think. It was close to $42.50, which was what was needed, you know? So, Neil was able to pay for a room, which was a double bed. He left Dell up there to buy his own room, but Dell didn't have any real money. And the clerk said, I'm going to have to say goodnight. And Dell was left to go out to the car. It's all charred up. It's snowing outside. And then you got this somber music playing, which is, you know, of course, the song that you guys are hearing, I think, right now. And Dell starts to recite a speech to his wife. You know, wishing that he was with her. So now it starts to become a little bit more heartfelt at this point. You start to feel really sorry for, you know, Del Griffith. You know, he wishes he was with his wife at that moment. But he realizes that's not going to happen. And he's sitting there just reciting to himself, you know, that he's found somebody whose company he really enjoyed and he screwed it up like he always does. And he wishes he could be much different. So while this scene's taking place, Neil can't sleep. He goes to the window. He sees Dell sitting in the car, so he has a change of heart. Invites him into the room. And they sit there and they drink these little bottles of tequila. They get drunk. They have snacks. And they're sharing each other's thoughts and all. You know, and there's a scene where they're talking about, you know, the very least, the absolute minimum is you have somebody you love to grow old with. They're talking about their wives. So it's another heartfelt scene between them. You know, it's a little bit of comedy mixture in there too. And of course they say goodnight. They go to bed the next day. They're trying to make their way out of the motel. The car's still running, by the way. But they end up getting pulled over by highway traffic, you know, after that, who impounds the car. So then they got to find another way back home. So they end up at a police station where Dell manages to get a hold of the semi, the, you know, truck driver, who agrees to take him into town to the bus station or the train station. But they got to ride in the back. They got to ride in the back in the refrigerant area, you know, where everything is stored at in the back tankard. But they manage to drop him off at the train station where they say their goodbyes. Neil thanks him, you know, hopes to see him sometime again in the future. Neil gets on the train and Dell's left there, very saddened. And then you got some real somber music playing, you know, Neil's reminiscing on the memories. You know, he's like, okay, I'm going home. I'm going to be with my wife, enjoying Thanksgiving today. And then he's thinking about his time with Dell. But then he starts piecing certain things that Dell has said throughout the movie to him, as something doesn't seem right about it. So then Neil decides to go right back to the train station. And his hunch was right. Dell's sitting inside the train station all alone, just sitting there. And this is one of the most heartbreaking moments of this movie. This is where John Hughes can really break you down. You know, John Hughes he is so he was such a genius with his movies when it comes to making you laugh and making you cry. And he knows when to do it and how to do it. And this is one of those scenes where he knows how to really break you down. Like, you were laughing hysterically in tears, and now you're going to be in tears when you learn, a backstory to Dell. And Neil feels very, very sad about it. Dell explains that he is homeless and he's a widower, stating that his wife had died 8 years earlier. So Neil feels very bad for him, but also decides to invite Neil, bring Neil, I'll get my words mixed up. He decides to bring Dell. He invites Dell, brings Dell home with him for Thanksgiving dinner, and introduces him to his family. And that is, Dell is his new best friend. Dell, he didn't want to be part of it. He was like, I'll just come in and say hi and I'll be on my way. But Neil had other plans. You don't know what those other plans are, but he invited him to come and spend Thanksgiving with them. And it's a very heartfelt last 5 minutes of the film. And just the closing scene where it focuses on John Candy's character, just standing there smiling. That fits all. That really fits all. And it's just very heartfelt. And you feel sad for him, you feel happy for him, you feel glad for him. All these emotions at the same time within this movie. And that's pretty much it. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's a hysterical comedy. It knows how to put you in tears with laughter. It knows how to tug your heartstrings and make you cry. Even as a grown man, it's like, oh, I'm not crying, I got something in my eye. That kind of thing. But John Hughes, he was so brilliant in knowing how to do all of that. And he does it very well with this movie. And I will say, like, every year watching this movie is almost a must when it comes to the Thanksgiving season. And, definitely rest in peace to John Candy, who passed away in the mid-90s. He was a very solid actor. And he didn't want to do too many comedies either. He wanted to get into some dramatic roles as well. Because, the following couple years, John Hughes, he's had a very particular role for John Candy. Since John Candy knocked it out of the park with this movie. He had a very special role for John Candy, and then the next movie that he did was Uncle Buck. And even though people say Uncle Buck didn't fare very well, we'll talk about that in the future, but Uncle Buck was a very good movie. I enjoy Uncle Buck. It falls along the lines very similar to what Planes, Trains, and Automobiles does. Now, with every John Hughes movie is always rated PG or PG-13. However, this is probably the only movie in John Hughes' library that is rated R. This movie could have been a PG-13 movie the way it continued on. Because back in the day, you can get away with certain subtleties and certain curse words, certain dialogue, certain profanity. You can get away with that in a PG or PG-13 movie, like with Back to the Future, where you got Michael J. Fox. Holy shit, and that movie was PG, you can get away with that. But this movie, it went for the R rating, and all because of one scene. And I already explained it. It's one scene halfway through the movie where he just outbursts 20-some fucks in a single dialogue scene. And that's what got it its R rating. But it is so worth it. This is an adult comedy, but if you're watching it uncut, if you're watching it cut on TV, it makes for a perfect family-friendly movie. And I definitely watch it every Thanksgiving. I watch it every year at least once, maybe twice. And I love the hell out of this movie. I grew up watching it. If you guys have yet to watch this movie yet, definitely do so. It is one of John Hughes' best movies out there. Came out in 1987. Rest in peace to John Candy. Such a genuine, passionate man when it came to acting. And he is greatly missed. 20 plus years, 30 years actually. Almost 30 years passing. So rest in peace, John Candy. So guys, I hope you guys are enjoying your Thanksgiving night. Christmas is around the corner, guys. Got much more reviews coming your way. Hope you guys have seen this movie. Hope you guys enjoy this movie. If you guys enjoy our episodes of Cinemacast right here, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. Also, if you guys are into streams, such as podcast streams and gameplay streams, right down below the links for our streaming sites, twitch.tv/arrow with a name and kick.com/arrow entertainment. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, link down below for that. And if you are on Discord, if you want to follow our Discord server for updates and much more, click that link, join our Discord server today. Anyway, guys, I'm out of here. Enjoy the rest of your Thanksgiving evening. Hopefully you guys take a gander at this movie and enjoy it. And I'll catch you next week right back here at the cinema for another episode. See y'all later.